Combining shapes together sounds a very basic thing, but it's actually a quite complex topic, but also very important. There's two main ways of doing it, either by using the Pathfinder panel or the Shape Builder tool. But first, let's have multiple shapes created. So I'm going to select my shape from the previous video, and using the selection tool, holding down the Alt or Option key, I'm going to make a duplicate, and I will intentionally overlap these two shapes. Now you probably noticed already that every new shape you create or every new object you create is going to be overlapping the previous shapes. So to prove that to you, I'm going to change the color here, maybe something else that will be obvious, and then we can see that this is actually overlapping the other shapes. So the other shape in the background is not visible, but it's still there, so I can always move it out or move it back again behind it. This is what we call arrangement of objects, and of course that can be changed, which we will come back to later. But for now, what I want to do is to actually merge these two shapes together. So I am going to select both of them, and I will go to the Pathfinder panel, which is here on the right. By the way, if you can't see it, from the window menu, you can always open it up. And within the Pathfinder, we have a couple of ways of combining shapes. The first option is called Unite. Then there's also minus front, and two other options here as well. But let's just choose the first one. So unite. Once we do that, it will unite the two shapes together. And notice how the fill and stroke colors are also now unified. And it uses the last created shape's fill and stroke colors. Let's try to subtract something from this. I'm going to switch to the Ellipse tool, and I draw an ellipse here. I will just change the color of this so we can see it's currently a separate shape. Now if I select both of these elements and I choose minus front in this case, then it's going to subtract from the previous shape. Almost like a cookie cutter, so the shape on top will be subtracted from the shape below. At its core, that's how the Pathfinder works, but it can be used in much more complex situations as well. So for example, if I have a few circles and I would like to subtract some other circles from them, I can also do that very easily. But first, let's just join them together. So I would like to create a cloud shape, for example, and that's why I have multiple circles created on top of each other. Once I select all of them together, I can just click on Unite, which will unite them into one outline. And then I can use additional two circles, let's say something like that, and another one. And I can select all of these together. Now if I choose minus front, then both of these circles will be subtracted from the other shape because they were both in front of it. So if you have multiple shapes when you use minus front, all of the shapes on top of the base shape will be subtracted from it. The same technique I can do very quickly with another tool called Shape Builder. So let me just undo my last couple of steps until I get back to having all these circles as independent objects. Instead of using the Pathfinder, now I'm going to use this tool, which you can even think of a tool version of the Pathfinder. It's called Shape Builder, and Shift+M is the shortcut set to it by default. With this, what you can do is to draw over sections to combine them together. As you can see, these are already turned into one outline. But you can also hold down the Shift key to hover over and select multiple parts and then merge them all into one shape. If you want to subtract from this, let's just subtract the rectangle at the bottom. So I just drew a rectangle, change its color just so we can see it's a different shape. Having both of these elements selected and switching back to the Shape Builder tool, I can hold down the Alt key or Option key and paint over the areas I wish to remove. And that is how you subtract parts. So that's how minus front would work in case of the Pathfinder. So once again, if I just draw another circle here and maybe another one next to it, if I select all of these shapes together using the Shape Builder tool, I can again Alt-click to subtract those two circles from the other shape. Now you will probably notice once you start combining shapes and subtracting and uniting them together, that sometimes it might say compound path here on the top. That's the object type. So it's not a simple shape anymore, it's a compound path. And that happens when you not only have an outline, like a silhouette around your shape, but it also has inner strokes. That's when the object becomes slightly more complex, and that's when Illustrator calls it compound path. The reason I mention that is because later on this will be very important, and this is the first time we start to see these compound paths. Another very important technique that we will be using throughout this course is called expand. Now, the expand command is from the object menu, that's where you can find it. And let me show you what it means at its core. So I am going to switch to the rounded rectangle tool, and I will draw a shape, and using the up arrow I'm going to increase the radius on it to something like that. I will also increase the stroke size on this, and I will remove the fill color from it. So now at the moment we have this outline, but it is still a stroke attribute, which means I can always increase the stroke size or decrease it. And it's good to know that you can do more things to strokes as well, which we will learn more about later on in the next chapter. But for now, just remember that this is a stroke. Why is that important? Well, if I draw another shape on top of this, even just a normal simple rectangle, and let's say I want to subtract this from the other shape. Intentionally, I'm going to swap the colors, so I press Shift+X, and I will change the color on it as well. So it only has a fill color, this shape, while the other one only has a stroke color. And what happens if I use Shape Builder or Pathfinder on this? Let's just pick the Shape Builder tool, hold down the Alt key, and paint over this section here. So that's what I wanted to subtract. Once I let go, what you will see is that the rectangle is removed, but because these parts were strokes or outlines, it divided that shape into two separate elements. So it automatically drew these lines, the bottom and the top. Let's just reverse a bit our step. And before I go ahead and use the shape builder, I am going to select that path in the background, and I'm going to go up to Object and choose Expand. Once I do that, it comes up with this dialog box, and here I can actually decide what do I want to expand, the fill or the stroke or both of them. If I choose both, that's what's most interesting, because then the stroke actually becomes a fill. Notice that now this object is selected, although we originally had that color set for the stroke, now it is used for the fill. So it's actually turned into a fill. And what that means, if I now select both of these objects and use the shape builder on them to subtract this in the front, it won't redraw those parts because now these elements are fills. And you might think that this is not that important, but let me show you quickly a way of using the shape builder tool and this technique that we've just learned to draw something interesting. I'm just going to move these shapes to the side, and I would like to draw an umbrella, let's just say. I am going to use only two types of shapes, the circle or ellipse tool and the rounded rectangle for that. So I will turn off the Pathfinder, and first of all I start with a big ellipse like that. I'm going to press D just to set it back to the default colors, and then I draw a smaller ellipse around the size of that. Now I'm going to switch to the selection tool and Alt click and drag this last shape. Then I'm going to repeat the same thing once again and repeat once again. And I can already combine these together with the shape builder tool. So let me select them all, and using the shape builder, I can hold down the Alt and Shift keys together to subtract and highlight a whole area which I would like to remove. So select all that, and it's immediately removed from the shape in the background. Now, if I'm not happy with how it looks, I can always undo this last step and just adjust these shapes slightly until they get more even. Something like that. Now I can select them again, shape builder, and using the shortcuts I will remove them. So now I have this subtracted shape here, And I'm going to draw another shape using the rounded rectangle tool. I just draw a shape around there. You will see exactly why I'm doing this. Now I will remove this fill color from here, and I will increase the stroke color, and I will also change the color of the stroke just to make sure it looks different. So I can imagine how it's going to work in the final design. That looks quite good. Maybe this width can be adjusted slightly, something like that. Okay, yep, that will work. Maybe the roundness can be made smaller, and then I can just move this all a little bit closer. That will be much better. So now I can expand this so it turns into fill. Whatever was stroke now becomes a fill. And before I do anything else, I will also add another rectangle, one here on the top, which I'm going to also again just set it back to default colors, and I'm going to do another one here on the left side all the way down to around here. Now if I select these shapes, and by the way you can add to your selection with a shortcut using the selection tool, hold down Shift to select multiple shapes. So I have these 3 shapes selected, but not the other shape in the background. So having all of them selected, now I can use the shape builder, and I can hold down the Alt key and paint over the parts just quickly that I don't need. Once I do that, you see what we are left with, and now you can see immediately that is going to work quite nicely with the umbrella. All I have to do now is to select that shape, add also a nice color, maybe yellow or orange, maybe remove the stroke from it, and immediately we have quite a nice design. And now to quickly move this in front of the other one, maybe change the color just so it looks very different, I can right click on it, arrange and bring to front is a way to change the order of objects. Once again, I will show you more about this later on, and for now just remember that you right click and then choose arrange, bring to front or back to change the order of objects. So that's how so that is just a quick example of how powerful even basic geometric shapes can be once they are combined with the techniques we learned in this video. So use the shape builder or pathfinder, and also don't forget the expand option with which you can turn strokes into fills. For Creative Cloud users, in the previous video I talked about the shaper tool, and I created this little tree here, which actually in a sense is very similar to a combination of the shape tools and the shape builder, but almost like all in one. At the end of this chapter, I'm going to give you several exercises where you can really practice all these techniques that we learned in this video and the other videos within this chapter. But now in the next video, it's time to move on to another important topic, selection techniques.